Good morning, everyone. I'm Tom Bracken, President and CEO of the New Jersey State Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to this morning's Reporters Forum. Happy belated New Year, and what a whirlwind year I think we're going to be experiencing in 2022. We have a governor who's just begun his second term with a self-proclaimed mandate to continue his progressive agenda, and he's still grappling with the COVID crisis and the havoc it's wreaked on the New Jersey economy. We have a state legislature where both parties have undergone substantial changes in leadership. We have a business community looking to Washington and Trenton for help while still trying to overcome the ravages of the COVID mandated shutdowns, the supply chain issues, and an unprecedented worker shortage. And of course, there are the usual issues in New Jersey around taxes and incentives, healthcare costs for businesses, the environment, and our infrastructure. So a very full plate and a lot of uncertainty, which is the enemy of business, which as I said, will add up to a very exciting 2022. Before we begin this morning's forum, I would like to thank our sponsor, Horizon Blue Cross and Blue Shield of New Jersey. Horizon has been a stalwart and generous supporter of the New Jersey Chamber for many years and of many forums like this, and we thank them tremendously. I also like to thank the member of Horizon, a team on our board, Chris LaPrey, for his great leadership and support for us over the years. Now let's get to the issues, and to introduce the panel of reporters and lead the discussion today is Tom Bergeron, owner and editor of ROI-NJ. Tom, it's all yours.
Thanks, Tom. Good to be here. Thanks for everyone who's out there. We enjoy doing these things, and we're always stunned that people show up to listen to us. So we'll do another one. We got an all-star team here. I'll go around the room. Rhonda Schaffler starts, the key business leader at NJ Spotlight, which does terrific stuff, both on TV and online. Love everything that they do. Rhonda, hello to you.
Hello, great to be here.
Next up is Sherman in the newsroom in the greater Princeton area for Bloomberg. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Whenever I'm online and there's an unbelievably cool story around the state, around the country, it always seems to be a Bloomberg story, and Stacey has a big part of that. Stacey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for that intro.
There you go. Last but not least, my friend Daniel Buños from my old stomping grounds at NJ Biz. Daniel is certainly the most prolific and perhaps the hardest working journalist in the state, certainly around the State House. Always good to have him. Daniel, what say you?
Oh, good to be here.
All right. Look, we prepared for weeks on end for this event. Actually, I sent people a list of questions about 8 minutes ago. So we're going to sort of turn the tables on reporters, and we're going to hit them with last minute questions and expect them to come up with smart thoughts. I have a number of topics that we're going to go through. We welcome you guys out there to send us questions on the chat screen. We're hoping that more than Walter will send questions in this time, but we love Walter, so send away, Walt. Let's go. Number one, new term, new year, new legislator, not a new governor, the second term. Was just hearing that there are 17 new faces in the legislature, 6 in the General Assembly, 1 in the Senate. Does it, and one of the ones that's no longer there is Steve Sweeney. Does it feel different? Daniel, you spend more time down there than any of us. Talk about Trenton and what the feeling is.
I think it certainly feels different. I think there's talks about whether the balance of power has shifted from South Jersey to Central and North Jersey, and what that can mean for particular businesses in those regions. I know that Sweeney was very vocal about legislation to help boost Camden and in Lenox City. So what things could look like now that the Senate president isn't in there, it's a bit up in the air, to say the least.
New Senate President Scutari. He's not new to the Senate, but he's new to the role. This should be an interesting situation. I know from what my reporting shows, there's a little bit of an early issue where Murphy sort of jumped the gun on announcing the extended state of emergency. And I know that Coughlin and Scutari were not happy by that. And you know that by when they released the statement, it was just them and not all 3 people. That being said, everybody knew that was coming. We can talk more about that later. Let's talk about the relationship with Murphy and Scutari going forward. Daniel, I'll stay with you.
I think it seems to be a bit up in the air. I mean, generally the barbs that were traded were between Sweeney and Murphy. So I think it's certainly, there seems to be a bit more of a mellow relationship between the governor and sort of the Central Jersey Democrats. Certainly with Coughlin that we've seen over the past 3 or so years, things seem to be a bit less headline grabbing things that they said. So I think I would not be surprised if it's more of the same very mellow kinds of statements, save for what happened with the state of emergency extension, which seemed to, and the school mask mandate, which seemed to catch a lot of people off guard, both in the Republican and the Democratic Party.
Stacey, what are you guys hearing at Bloomberg about the relationship and what you think is coming down the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months?
I think a lot of change is ahead. I think Trenton is used to Steve Sweeney. He's been there. He was there for a really long time. His election was a big shock to the system, a big shock for the future of New Jersey's, Democratic Party. So they're going to be on edge and have that election in the back of their mind as they move forward in this session and try to get some stuff done.
All right, let's move on to the governor had a big revelation in one of his speeches recently where he talks about, hey, maybe New Jersey isn't quite as affordable as it could be. This was a big shock to everybody I know. So I want to get to the tax issue, and I'm going to ask for a show of hands, even though I can't see them. And I like to point out the idea of, Donald Trump had one huge tax cut. Show of hands for everyone who remembers that. And I think everyone's hand's coming up. And I'm not in any way being political or talking about whether we think they were smart. Governor Murphy has said he has made 14 tax cuts. I want to move to Rhonda because NJ Spotlight did a great report breaking down what those were. I don't think anybody remembers any of the 14 tax cuts. I'm not going to say that they weren't good. I'm not going to say they weren't helpful. But was this just the way of the governor finding a spot here and there to call it a tax cut? Is anybody saying, wow, thanks, we've had 14, no more, this is incredible? Rhonda, what did you guys' reporting show on that?
So, it was so interesting. I will say the day that the governor gave his speech and said 14 tax cuts, we were kind of in the newsroom like, wait, what tax cuts? Let's try to add them up. So my colleague, John Reitmeyer, did that a few days later. And, the issue with those tax cuts is they were very targeted. So not everyone felt them. For instance, expanding tax credits for veterans. So obviously, if you're not a veteran, you're not going to be impacted by that. So there were a lot of moves, but they were targeted to individual groups. So while you have this list, a lot of people did not benefit from them. So I think that's why it caught a lot of people by surprise. I mean, there definitely were focuses on middle class tax cuts, lower income tax cuts, but because they were so targeted, it just feels a little bit different. But listen, John fact-checked them and they are there. It's just that they might have affected far fewer people than you would think.
Stacey, you'll jump in on this. Do you feel like we're in a state that's had an unbelievable amount of tax cuts and it's impacting things?
I mean, I think Governor Murphy is making a calculated, it's risky what he's doing where there are other governors, if you remember, Governor Whitman will be remembered for her income tax cut. Florio will be remembered for his income sales tax increase. Corzine will be remembered for his sales tax cut and some other things. But making most governors will make their legacy. They want their legacy to be one big thing. And Murphy's doing something different where I guess he's trying to help people and people remember that one tax cut that helped them, but I don't know if it'll work as effectively as what other governors have done.
All right, show of hands of everyone who heard Florio and taxes and immediately thought of toilet paper. Is there anyone else who did that? Daniel will explain that to you later. Daniel, we like to pick on because he's much younger than the rest of the crowd, but we love his insights. So let's move on to what, if you're going to claim for all these tax cuts, is it fair to say that this is a tax raise? And we know the governor has said no more tax raises. The unemployment fund, replenishing that. I think that's very important to a lot of people on this call. Look, the numbers are 252 million now, 1.7 billion over 3 years. I know that because I checked that with the state and they said, right, the businesses out there need to replenish that fund. A lot of states, some states have used some of the federal government funds to put that in. And let's be fair, Murphy's had a lot of programs for businesses around the state. And to be fair, a lot of it's been 8,000 here, 10,000 here, 4,000 here. Listen, $10 is $10. We'll all take it. But compared to the $252 million increase on the UI fund, it doesn't seem to add up. This is what I hear from business owners the most is the biggest issue. Rhonda, is that what you guys are hearing?
Absolutely. And I mean, that is a tax increase. There's no way around it. If you're paying more and the numbers are going up for you, it is what it is. You raised the point that other states have used those federal funds. I'm quite frankly surprised we haven't done that in New Jersey because that fund was really decimated. I mean, businesses really, the chamber included, have been very vocal about the need for some help with replenishing the fund. So I'm surprised it has not happened. And it is just another pain point for New Jersey businesses.
Is there any chance that the state could borrow a whole bunch of money that might help pay that back? Is that possibility of that happening? Let's get into the funds that we do have, not just the borrowing, but a lot of the funds have not been spent. Daniel, what are you hearing about that? Where's that money going? Where's it earmarked for? Bring us up to date.
I guess the problem is that a lot of groups have their hand out, and even groups that I guess not directly related to businesses. I know there's talks or efforts to push more of the excluded worker funds to come out of the ARP. I think one of the concerns in Trenton is that it might go to pork spending. I think a lot of us have heard that phrase, that it goes to things to benefit a particular legislator's district. I think it was December, around $700 million that this special legislative committee approved for the spending. So various kinds of items. Hackensack Meridian Health got some to help to prepare and boost up their healthcare capability. So the government has to be very strategic in making sure it's not just replenishing things, or sort of fixing problems that came out of COVID, but anticipating what the future problems could be that led to COVID being so devastating for the healthcare system and for businesses in the state and for residents in the state, and helping to prevent future kinds of crises for hurting residents and businesses for years down the road.
Stacey, what do you think? Where's the fund going? Where should it go? Where are you hearing it's going? Is this a big issue in the state?
I think it is a big issue. I'm looking forward to the governor's budget in a couple of weeks. I think as I interviewed Tom Bracken a couple of months ago, and he said something, that the first term was dedicated to, Murphy helping individuals, and you were hoping that the second term was dedicated to helping businesses. And that is really, with the budget, this is where the governor has an opportunity to make the business community whole again. So I think the unemployment issue is a big one, and that he could address it with the budget. I don't know about, we have the money from the federal government. The issue is that he doesn't want to spend it all in one budget. I think he's trying to soften the blow of just not having it. So I'm curious to see how he decides to spend that money, and so we'll have to see with the budget.
Stacey, tip of the hat journalistically for getting that Tom Bracken interview. We know that Tom's always tough to get him to discuss business issues in the state and to offer an opinion too. It's so good work there. Let's move more on business. We've heard about it. And let's give the governor some credit here. There's been some big wins, and he had a lot of big wins right before the election. We can talk about the Fiserv expanding their campus in Berkeley Heights. That could be 2,000 more people. Beijing down in the greater Princeton area, bringing in manufacturing, a lot of jobs. Hacks is going to be a fantastic thing for Newark, a real startup to help that. Netflix, it looks like could be coming. We're not totally sure yet, but there's a lot of good chance there. There's a lot of innovative ideas that are happening and working. Does the governor deserve credit for doing what he said he was going to do and getting a lot of this done? Rhonda, I go to you.
I will will give him some credit. I mean, I would add to the list the Hub project in New Brunswick, the move with wind energy in South Jersey, and really trying to solidify some jobs there. So, and he also has, for instance, the Evergreen Fund, which tries to promote startup companies. So I will give him credit. I mean, I think one of the issues with the innovation economy, and when you talk about startup companies, and we've got a pretty good startup scene here in Newark, for instance, those don't create all sorts of jobs right away, right? So it takes time for a company to start, to survive, to add people. So, you don't get those huge numbers when you talk about the startup economy. But to your point, names like Fiserv, there are some big wins along with those smaller wins. And the governor has said that that's something, he wants to kind of have New Jersey become known like we were with Bell Labs. So I think he gets some credit there. Does it mean that our unemployment rate drops quickly? No, it doesn't, because it'll take time for all of that to take hold. But, he seized on that phrase. He talked about the innovation economy again as he was sworn in for his second term. So we're going to see more of the same, I think, on that in the second term.
Stacey, I'll bring you in because you remember, as I do, and most of the people out here, New Jersey was the medicine chest of the country or the world or whatever. And look, Debbie Hart's going to argue that we still have tons of life sciences, which we do. But is the narrative changing? Are we becoming the innovation state, whether we change the license plate or not, which is another fun story? Is he starting to change that narrative and get that done?
I think he has the potential to. I mean, the medicine chest that people left New Jersey because it was too costly to do business here. He's trying to change that. These tax incentives have been shown to lure business. It's just now we have to wait and see. I think 2022 is going to be a big year. It's these companies, he's lured them. Now we have to see them, come, create jobs, hire people, spend money, and hopefully lure other businesses. So I think in a year's time, when we do this in a year, we'll have a lot more information and we'll be able to see if this innovation economy really works.
Daniel, you're the newcomer to the group. You've only seen the state for the last X number of years. Are you seeing from where you are, which actually brings a great perspective, are you seeing a nice shift in how New Jersey is viewed and what it's doing in your 4 or 5 years of hardcore reporting that you've been doing?
If you go to like the tech circles, so like BioNJ, well, that's biotech, BioNJ, Tech United, which is sort of like the tech industry's big group, there certainly does seem to be a lot of excitement about what could come. Same with sort of the clean energy sector, like offshore wind, electric vehicles. But like everyone else said, this takes a long time. Like most of these tax break agreements are like 10-year agreements. And generally you hear like the average time that like a medical device or a new pill or drug takes from concept to actually being on the shelves could be upwards of a decade. So these things will take time, but there is certainly a lot of excitement just interviewing different business heads and entrepreneurs and startups that things look like they have a lot of potential in New Jersey in the innovation sector.
So let's talk a little bit about the commercial real estate sector, which is going to be totally off the list of what I sent you guys, but it comes up. Some of the white elephants, as we like to say, out in the suburbs that pre-pandemic all look dead. All we're going to become Amazon warehouses or multifamily units and this and that. There seems to be, and Fiserv is creating this great campus in Berkeley Heights, seems to be more of an interest in that suburban campus now for a lot of reasons. Maybe people don't want to use transit. Maybe the rush to the cities has slowed. This is going to be a post-pandemic change. Are you guys seeing from a CRE standpoint, potentially the state, which is one big suburb, right, suddenly being in vogue and in play as far as attracting more companies? Rhonda, I'll start with you.
I've heard that. I spoke with somebody recently in Newark who said just that companies are kind of rethinking their footprints. Satellite offices in New Jersey look attractive as opposed to having people commute into New York. We know that's not happening right now when you look at NJ Transit's ridership numbers. I mean, we have a lot of suburban office space, and clearly, I'm in Central Jersey, so I see a lot of the warehouse development in towns near me. So that has been something that has been ongoing and continues. But, I haven't seen so much action as I have talk about an interest in looking at some of these office spaces and thinking a little bit more deeply about if you want to have your entire workforce in Manhattan after the pandemic. I think there's a real rethink over that. So I think that's something else that in 2022, that's when we're going to see the evidence play out. Because if companies feel like they don't have to worry so much about the pandemic and let's bring everyone back, maybe some of this talk will be forgotten. But I think this will be the year that, companies think a little bit more about their space, their leasing, and where they want their workforce, and whether hybrid working continues on beyond the worst of the pandemic.
You mentioned the satellite or the hub and spoke approach. And if Ralph Zucker is watching, he's going to say, hey, Bellworks is doing great. I mean, they really are. They introduce different sizes, small, mediums, and large. They're telling people, if you need a remote workspace or a permanent workspace, come here. And by all accounts, Bellworks is doing fabulously well. That idea of coming again, it's a beautiful facility if you haven't been there. Stacy, talk about that. Talk about the hub and spoke approach. Talk about a new way of working in New Jersey. Are you guys seeing evidence of that, or is it just talk?
As you see, I'm in my office and I am all alone. This is my first pandemic, as it is for many of us, most of us. This has, I really think, changed the conversation. In general, I know I feel like that idea of being in New York City and on top of each other and crowded, that we were headed towards, where New York City had this huge growth. COVID has changed that, where we want to be spread out. We want to be, we don't want to be so close to each other in an office. And then the conversation is about whether remote work, whether people can actually work remotely, and companies are going back and forth about that. Our company is going back and forth about that, whether you can do the same job in the office that you can do at home. I think this year is going to really lay the groundwork for whether the future of cities versus suburban. I think in general we're leaning towards suburban, warehouses because of those reasons, because of COVID, and because we have no idea when this freaking COVID thing is going to end. It just, every time it seems like it ends, it comes back. So I think for the near future, the idea of suburbs and remote work is here to stay.
This is sort of cable, let the expletive fly. It's okay. We're all good. Speaking of what, something that is making the expletive fly, nice transition here, is the tax fight with New York, talking about people working at home, working in New Jersey. Senator Oraho will say over and over again, we have to get on this. The New York companies are still taxing New Jersey residents. This is found money for New Jersey, both residents and the state. It doesn't cost us anything. He can't understand why we're not fighting more to change some of the tax rules. It seems like remote work and hybrid work is here to stay. What's going on with that? Daniel, let's go to you down the legislature. There doesn't seem to be a lot of movement on that. And I, for one, don't know why.
It seems to be more something that's being left up to the courts, the federal courts, because this is an interstate issue. I think the thing that seems to be a lot juicier is this sort of the congestion pricing tax. So if you're coming in from the Hudson River crossing, that seems to be something that can be handled at the state legislators. I know Governor Murphy has threatened to potentially veto the minutes of the Port Authority Board, which would basically, eventually they wouldn't be able to get anything done. And that seems to be kind of a very big muscle and move. And I think any sort of by state action requires both legislators to approve that or approve things what Port Authority wants to do. So there does seem to be a lot of bi-state, interstate tensions of a lot of people who typically commuted to New York, which made New Jersey land so valuable. Is those people are starting to instead want to work in New Jersey or spend less of their time in New York City.
Right, let's go back to the last question on business in New Jersey. The governor mentioned 3 times in his last speech, we were 4th in the nation in GDP growth, right? It sounds like a fabulous thing. We used to be 47th. Now we're 4th. Hey, everything's working. It's great. A little bit of research on what the GDP shows is that quarterly number fluctuates pretty good. And I've got it in front of me, so I'm going to read it off. Yes, we were tied for 4th in the country for the 3rd quarter for 2021, but we were 20th in the 2nd quarter. We were 39th in the 1st quarter of that same year, 21st in the 4th quarter of the year before, 13th the quarter before that. So it goes up and down. GDP growth clearly is not the way to measure the state's growth. But at the same time, again, some things are happening. Give us a state on growth. Last question on the economy. Do you think we're the 4th fastest growing economy in the state, or do you think we have a lot more work to do? Rhonda, you're smiling. Let's go to you.
I know, because I love this part, and I was so intrigued when the governor said this, and I was just like looking through data like the complete data nerd I am. But let's just start with this. If your economy doesn't show positive gains after a recession, that's bad. So let's just consider where we came from. I mean, we were having negative growth because we were in the middle of a pandemic and things were shut down. So listen, GDP growth fluctuates. We got national GDP growth numbers right before we started this, and we're not keeping pace. But more importantly, you can talk about GDP growth. And, this is why economists kind of smooth out the numbers. And when you have an aberration like we've had with the pandemic, it's really hard to kind of make sense in a way. But what does resonate with people is the jobless number. And you didn't hear the governor talk about that. He kind of gave it a passing mention. 6.3% in New Jersey. We're higher than the national average. And, that's what people think about is, are they employed? Do they feel safe in their job? Are they going to get a better job? I mean, you don't go to a cocktail party and have people say, hey, GDP growth last quarter, it was great, wasn't it? I mean, what people talk about is, hey, so-and-so's lost their job or they're out of work. So there's a lot of ways to measure growth. GDP is one of them. I'll go back to when you just had a recession, those numbers just, I would take with a grain of salt. I mean, what I look at is the fact that New Jersey has recovered 3/4 of the jobs lost at the worst of the pandemic, March, April 2020. So we're not whole yet. Other states are. And that is what I think is a something better to focus on, because to your point, next quarter, we could have a whole different story with the GDP.
Stacey, you're nodding vigorously. Jump in there.
I agree with Rhonda. I mean, I think the time to brag is when we have recovered all the jobs that we lost and then move above that, right? Where we're gaining. I think some states have reached that level, and we should be too. I think with GDP, or when you're looking at the economy, we had 16% unemployment. So when you're at that bottom, up is the only way to go, right? So that's just, you hear a lot of governors talk about recovery. It's like, yeah, when you're in a recession, you're not going any lower. You got to go up. So.
I'll bring this up because we saw this story yesterday and we're putting this out today. It's sort of a fun story about how, one of the things New Jersey is good at is apparently we're not quitting like the rest of the states. From whatever this particular group and whatever their analysis is, and take what it is, we are 9th least on the number of people who are quitting their jobs in the resignation. I know all of us out here know people who cannot find employees. No people have left. I've yet to find anyone who can explain how these people are paying their rent and their mortgage once they quit their job. But the state is not quitting as much. We clearly have unemployment, though. We clearly need more workers. Let's talk a little bit about the work shortage or the work needs and the cost of living. Daniel, this is a whole bunch of stuff, so I'm going to drop this in your lap. Give me an idea. Are you resigning any day soon? We'll start.
No plans at the moment. So certainly anecdotally, that's not what I've heard from business owners, that there's been sort of a boom of hiring or a shortage of people quitting. That was an odd play of words, but I think the hope seems to be that maybe as businesses sort of start to be able to pony up more cash, or they're maybe make sacrifices to be able to or willing to get more workers out. That possibly, as the things reopen this summer, that will be the case. Cost of living has gone up. The consumer price index has gone up. So that seems to be something that has to be grappled with.
Stacey, you get a national view at Bloomberg too, not just locally. Talk about New Jersey and the Great Resignation compared to the rest of the state from what your amazing team is finding out.
You're so complimentary today, Tom. I really appreciate it. I think one issue we haven't talked about yet, as a woman and a mom, I mean, the big issue right now is school and childcare, and we got to figure this out. It is a huge problem, and for any working woman, that is a big problem and a big impediment to getting the economy back up and running. If most times the role of child care falls on the mom more than the dad. And so for working parents, this has been a really tough couple of years. And I think President Biden has trying to address the issue of child care and of getting women back in there. And I think that is a big issue. I've heard Governor Murphy's address it as well, right? I think he's proposed tax credits for child care. And I think that's an important, often neglected topic that I think will be key to bringing people back and the economy back.
Rhonda, let me bring you in on that because there are so many parts of this. Look, anyone who has had childcare knows that it seems to cost an arm and a leg, right? At the same time, the childcare places will tell you that we can't find workers, mainly because a lot of them are, quite frankly, underpaid. And as a working parent and certainly a working mom, making sure your child is secure is someplace is a wonderful thing. And then you go to the whole school issue on whether they're going to be hybrid, whether they're going to be remote. And then you throw in the whole mask issue on whether they should or shouldn't be and what one particular school or school district or childcare center does. That's a lot for anyone to juggle, but a working mom whose number one concern is her children. That's just a lot. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And kind of wrapping it all together, I guess, when you think about how fewer people are quitting in New Jersey, as Daniel said, I mean, listen, it's how do you afford it, right? So you've got that. Then you've got the situation for women who, on top of the childcare responsibilities, women get paid less than men. Every national statistic will show you that, including in New Jersey. So if you're going to sacrifice one person's career temporarily, it tends to be the woman for a number of reasons. I mean, look, here's the issue with childcare. Even if you're going back to work or you feel comfortable putting your child in childcare, they might not be able to take your child because they don't have the staffing to have more kids in the classroom. So it is a very important issue. And over the past year, there's been several panels from business groups, and childcare always comes up. And these childcare providers are struggling. So there's no easy answer. I mean, I think the bigger picture is this is such massive disruption in the labor market. I've certainly never seen anything like this. I mean, you go back to the Great Recession, and that looks like child's play compared to what's going on here. I think people are really, companies, individuals, everyone is rethinking the future of work, and nobody has the right answers just yet. And even let's say a childcare provider, they can't afford to pay workers more in this environment. They're paying more for all their supplies and everything else. So it's very, very complicated. And some of it is out of a leader's control. I mean, Governor Murphy can't control inflation. So it's very tough, and it's still playing out. That part of this story is not over at all.
What are you hearing out of the legislature, Daniel? Everybody knows this is an issue. It's no surprise, right? And it's not like this just came up in the last year, although it certainly has grown. What do they want to do? What can they do? What do you think could possibly happen to help care for our children? What more could you want than that?
Well, the governor set aside, I think it was several hundred million. I think it was $700 million to subsidize childcare, both wages and childcare subsidies to the people who have to pay for the costs of having someone look over their child while they're working or at the workplace. From business leaders, there seems to be criticism that it's not moving out fast enough and that the worker shortages are happening right now. So it can't be sort of a trickle down. It can't sort of trickle out of the fund, that the funds need to be flowing out to the people who need to pay for child supervision and to the businesses. So beyond that, I think other affordability things have to do more with property taxes, which I guess is semi-related, peripherally. But I think in terms of childcare, there does seem to be a push that the childcare fund needs to be sped up in terms of getting funds out on the street.
Daniel, I'm going to stay with you because it was one topic that we didn't bring up, and we're talking about paying for childcare and finding money. Another issue that's coming up is a number of utility bills, rent, all of these moratoriums on some of this stuff are starting to come due. And you're seeing there's an issue of the money's not there. And that for a business owner, for a landlord, that's a difficult situation. For a utility, some of the utility people are saying, hey, let's use some of the federal funds to help pay back some of these utility bills that we sort of forgave. Getting through that is going to be a big issue. Where are you hearing the legislature on some of those issues?
Well, there are, as I mentioned, a few property tax and eviction related relief, both for the landlords and the tenants. I think there's one bill being heard in about 20 minutes that if you're a landlord, you can claim a larger percentage of the rent payments for property tax deduction. So there are different kinds of tax breaks for different business owners and homeowners and property owners that are meant to at least soften the blow of the way that the affordability issue has played out in the past few months.
All right, I've got a solution for all of this, right? You ready? I've solved the problem. We need a lot of money, so why don't we just legalize pot? We'll get boatloads of cash. It's all coming in, shoe boxes full of 20s. It's perfect. The governor talked about this before he ran the first time. Here we are 4 years later. We're still trying to work this through. I think people are still getting pot who want it, but I don't know that the state's getting the revenue. Daniel, bring us up to speed on the legislature of where we're going with this and why haven't we gotten the great influx of pot money, for lack of a better phrase.
I think the rulemaking, the CRC is rolling that out at various stages. The CRC is the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, which basically oversees the pot industry. It's been held up in court for varying degrees, of varying reasons. It's been held up in politics. I think Scutari and the governor, there's the Star Ledger article that came out earlier this week that 2022 will be the year that the marijuana industry takes off. I think right now, if you want pot, Massachusetts is not a terribly long drive from here. So
I don't even have a comment on that. I'm going to go to Stacey and Rhonda. Weigh in on, again, whether you guys feel the need to drive to Massachusetts or more importantly, where you see the cannabis industry in New Jersey headed.
I'll jump in. I do see 2022 as the year will finally get going in New Jersey, but at the same time, it'll also be the year for New York as well. So we have to wait and see, how big of a market this is going to be nationally. I don't think there's as many pot smokers as you think there are, Tom. I just don't think the state revenue is a panacea. It's going to help, but I don't see, you have I don't even remember what we're up to, $35 billion budget. You're talking about a couple $100 million once it gets going of tax revenue, if I'm correct. I'm just trying to remember, but it's not billions. You're not talking about billions in money for the state in tax revenue. There's other benefits. There's jobs and contributions to the economy, but I just don't think it's a big solution for any state.
Well, if I was a betting man, what's the transition here, Rhonda? I'd say sports betting and now esports betting, which we're kicking Nevada's butt on rather quick, is good for our future, which is great. So we're not the medicine chest anymore. We're not the innovation state. But apparently, if you're looking for vices, if you're looking for pot or gambling, we're all set. Rhonda, talk about the power and the growth of sports betting and how well we've done and what that means.
You know, we have done well. New Jersey, when we topped $1 billion in sports betting, when we look at the monthly figures, there was a lot of excitement over that. I'll actually link it back to marijuana because other states are getting into sports betting. So the real issue is, does New Jersey hold on to that revenue? And of course, that turns into revenue for the state. So we have done quite well. I mean, I think we have to wait to see what happens on the competitive front, whether we can maintain that edge. I don't know if we have that many people out there that want to bet on sports to support all these different markets. And of course, we're talking about online, so that you have to throw into the mix. But clearly, we have done well with sports betting and producing that revenue. And it does have people, you know, in Atlantic City feeling better about things. But once you have others in the market, I just don't know. I mean, this is, you know, just going back to marijuana for a minute. I mean, this is sometimes what it helps to have a first mover advantage to get things going. I will say with the marijuana market, one thing I found interesting is that you did have a lot of people interested in getting in the industry and applying for licenses, which I just, you know, there is interest among people who think they can make money off of it.
Well, from the reporting I've done on this, it's not the street sales that have been jokes about. It's the medical marijuana industry that really has a chance where we can combine our long history of medication in those type of ailments. And programming note here, because someone has sent it in the chat box for those who didn't see it, the Chamber is going to have a great discussion on women in the workplace tomorrow at 10 o'clock, hosted by our former ROI colleague, Angelique Hemlati from Yahoo. So more on that topic, which is a good one. All right, let's go to a fun one here. Let's talk about elections. Let's get political. It's a simple opening question that I'm going to throw out. Did the governor learn anything from the last election? Daniel, go.
Well, it's almost as if I'm a politics reporter or something. I think he has conceded that affordability hasn't been addressed. He's really held off on doing that for most of the lame duck session. So from the elections to when the new legislator was sworn in, he's like, we're not going to change our stripes. We're stronger and fairer. We're progressive. And then come his second inauguration address, he's saying that we've ignored the biggest sources of expenses, the biggest sources of pain for people's wallets, which is, I think, education, healthcare, property taxes. So I think there is going to be more movement on that because I think just of the reputation New Jersey gets. Again, there's legislation in the works and committee hearings. Murphy has hinted that it may be part of his budget, sort of property tax relief, affordability relief. And that's not something that I don't think has been campaigned as heavily on in prior budgets in the way we're seeing now.
Daniel, staying with you, legislators, look, these guys are going to be up for election again, right? And we saw there were a lot of surprise defeats last time out, not only Senator Sweeney. And from what I hear from people saying, look, Murphy can have his agenda and have his vision and have all of that, but I got to win re-election here. And my group and my area is saying different things. Is that going to impact this fear of being upset and losing your seat? Is that going to impact the governor's office relationship with the legislature as far as getting things done?
Well, I think not only that, I'd say yes, but not only that, I mean, there's the congressional midterm race that are going to start heating up this spring and summer. So I think if people are upset about property taxes, even though, say, our Democrats in Congress, even though they don't have any control over that, voters might take their anger out on people like Malinowski, who is a particularly competitive district in Central Jersey. So I think that's going to be a lot of pressure from lawmakers to provide more tax cuts or property tax or other kinds of tax relief. I think there's going to be a lot more pressure on lawmakers.
Rhonda, I'm going to let you jump in there. Again, you and the Spotlight crew, what are you hearing about the reaction to the election?
I absolutely agree with everything that was said. I mean, I think Governor Murphy did learn a lesson because those numbers were so close and there were points in the night that it was really a wild card as to who would win the election. This, affordability, that's all you hear now in Trenton. Daniel was referring to a bill that was going to be voted on. the press release from that committee, we're dealing with bills on affordability today. So I think that the national political environment will impact how we see action from our legislators in New Jersey. What I'm really looking for when we talk about affordability, I mean, whether Governor Murphy can actually reduce the property taxes, as he hinted at, when that budget is introduced, is there increased spending again? And I think that's going to be a really interesting point for the administration and lawmakers. And then if there is, how are we paying for that? Because that's what we do in New Jersey. We introduce budgets that increase spending. So I think affordability, there's a reason everyone keeps talking about it. And if they don't take some action, I think there's going to be some real disappointment in the state.
You know, it was funny coming out of this, there was a belief that because New Jersey and Virginia sort of went first, we would have a head start on some of these other states and Murphy was going to win and we could be established while everybody else was trying to figure it out. But now they're, you know, after everything that happened here, not quite as upsetting as what happened in New Jersey, upsetting from a statistical standpoint, not a personal view. Stacey, talk about that idea of New Jersey and the elections, and are we set up, and what do we have to face moving forward as other states having more elections than we do since we're already through the governor's race?
Yeah, depending on who you ask, if you ask the governor's people, that they'll say that the election was a great success. It was the first time a Democrat was elected to a second term since Brendan Byrne. But this was a really close race, and I think it became a close race because of the issue, because of affordability. Jack Ciattarelli really hammered the governor on his tax comments. And when you're around as long as I've been around, and I think two of you are, you've seen it all. You've seen all these elections. It always in New Jersey comes down to costs and affordability. And I think the governor's message of this stronger and fairer, I get it. We're all living in New Jersey for the good programs and the good schools and that, but we have to be able to afford our bills. And I think property taxes have gone up every year for as long as I can remember, decades. And I think once you hit your second term, you start to realize, okay, what is my legacy? And in New Jersey, if you want a positive legacy as a governor, it has to be you cut costs or you cut taxes. And I think that is where the governor is right now.
Well, geez, he's already done it 14 times. I don't know how much. Look, let's talk about legacy. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about the question that oddly is coming up for someone who many believe squeaked by in a race that was closer than expected. Someone who is a Northeast Democrat who generally does not fare that well on the national scale. Someone who is an older white male, we'll say that too. But with all that in mind, some people say, hey, if for some reason Joe Biden chooses not to run for re-election, would Murphy be a potential candidate? The governor has said he's not interested. He wants to be in New Jersey. Take that for what that's worth. Do any of you see that there would be any room for a Murphy for president run, or for Murphy to leave his term early, take another ambassador job, another secretary job? Do you think do you think this was really the last election he had and he's going to do all 4 years? Let's go backwards or forwards. I'll start with you, Stacey.
I think he is going to do all 4 years. I think he fought really hard for this second term, and there is a lot left to do. You do hear the governor talking about national issues, and he wants to have a voice with them, with abortion, women's rights, voting rights, gun control. You hear him speaking about it and signing laws related to it. So he definitely wants to have a voice, but I think he wants to get the job. He believes in what he's doing in New Jersey. So I would, if I had to bet, I would think he would stick around for the 4 years.
Rhonda?
I would agree. I think he sticks it out through 4 years. I also do think that he wants to be part of a national conversation, whether it's just talking or actually doing something else. I don't know. I mean, I just think it's hard to call right now, but he he wants his very loud progressive voice on some of those key issues heard, and we'll see if that's enough to satisfy him.
Daniel.
I have to agree. I think he's going to try to do the 4 years. I just think back to Christie's own presidential aspirations and how his time spent campaigning in Iowa and New Hampshire really bolstered his unpopularity, and him taking legislative action, vetoing bills or taking executive action that were deeply unpopular in New Jersey for the hope that it would get the attention of Republicans in primary states, that really tanked his popularity. So I imagine that Murphy, if he does have national aspirations, that's something that he's going to have to consider.
From what I've seen, and I'll throw in my 2 cents, I think the governor believes what he believes. I think he wholeheartedly believes that. I don't see him making a whole lot of decisions based on how other people will see it, sometimes even in his own state. I don't see him looking to making that to show a different standpoint. He seems to believe what he is. He's a hardcore progressive. He believes in everything that he says, and seemingly is doubling down on that. All right, we're wrapping up. We got one time for one lightning round question, maybe 2. The New Jersey economy in 2022, there's been a number of surveys. A lot of banks have put stuff out where generally business leaders have a favorable opinion and are confident moving forward. So I'm going to ask you guys on 1 to 10. I know you like the 1 to 10 rail. 1 means the economy goes in the absolute tank. 10 means the economy is going great guns. Where do you see the New Jersey economy in the next year? We'll go reverse order again. Daniel, 1 to 10.
I give it a 6. I think there's going to be still supply chain issues, shipping delays, hiring shortages, and sort of this uneasiness with Omicron or whatever other variant. I think there was a lot of expectation a year ago that it was just up, that things will just get better and everyone will get vaccinated, and then Delta variant kind of threw cold water on that, and people realize that, well, maybe we need to be more careful, when maybe we don't need to go out into bars and go back to the office. So I think it's going to be recovery, but it's going to be a bit slower. So I give it a 6.
Rhonda, 1 to 10, New Jersey economy.
Okay, Daniel stole my number because I had 6 in my head, but I would say I was torn between 6 and 7 because we're definitely above a 5. But I do think there is a lot of headwinds. I'll add to those headwinds that Daniel mentioned. We now are going to be moving into a rising interest rate environment. So that is kind of another thing that businesses have to settle into. So I think also recovery, but slow, and it's going to be bumpy.
Rhonda, you said you used the Price is Right technique and made it 6.1 and sort of edged them out.
Okay, I'm going to go with 6.5.
Stacy, 1 to 10.
Maybe I'm just going to be selfishly optimistic or hopefully optimistic. I'll go between a 7 and 8. I really think we have a lot of potential, and I'm hopeful that it gets better with all these different issues. There's a lot going on right now, but I think it's going to get a lot better.
All right. With that, I'm going to segue to someone who we all think is a perfect 10, Tom Bracken. He's going to talk about what's going on in AC on April 13th and 14th, where we're going to do this type of conversation with an extended audience and extended people. Tom and his team are already prepping that. Tom, what say you?
First of all, Tom and Stacy and Rhonda and Daniel, you knocked it out of the park again. I mean, I just love listening to all you interact and talk, and I agree with most of what you said. The only thing I would add to everything you've said, and something that really impacts most of the business issues right now that could impact it positively, is we need to get more people vaccinated. We need to get more people boosted. That is a key component to many of the things we're talking about today. I'll give a shameless plug that we did a PSA for the Department of Health, which will start to run on the radio this week, I believe, or next week. It is a huge issue, the issue of the COVID. We need to get those people who have been vaccinated boosted. It can be a great economic boost for our state. So I'll leave it at that. But anyway, all 4 of you, we could listen to you for hours, and unfortunately we only have an hour. But on April the 13th and 14th at the Borgata in Atlantic City, we will be hosting an event called Renew Jersey Business Summit. It'll be very similar to the two business summits that we've had in the past in 2015 and 2017, where we had hundreds of people there with great interaction. And we did produce some initiatives that benefited the business community of our state. We'll have an assembly of panel experts on different topics, trying to find ways to unleash issues or uncover issues or promote issues that will get New Jersey's full throttle economy back in place. All the panels will be entirely interactive, both between the panelists and the audience. We will have no speeches. We will have hopefully no partisanship issues addressed, and there will be no finger pointing. We're looking for solutions. We're not looking for blame. So the two-day summit will also include several very large networking events, including a business expo where companies can showcase their products and services. That'll be at the beginning of the first day. So for more information and to register, you can contact your chamber representative. And also, I believe Rick Principata has posted the registration link in the chat room as we are speaking. So please consider coming to the summit. It's going to be a very, very interactive and important event for New Jersey businesses. And I believe it'll be well worth your time to be there. Again, let me thank Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield for the sponsorship today, and Tom and Rhonda and Stacy and Daniel. Great job. We always have a great turnout when you come and great interactive discussions. So thank you. Thank you for all who participated, and please have a good day.